In this episode, we're going to dive into perfectionism in sports. I'll explain why athletes tend to be perfectionists, how perfectionism holds you back as an athlete, and then a strategy that you can use to work through and manage this perfectionism. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, a mental performance coach who works with athletes from around the world on building a stronger mental game. Perfectionism means the need to be and appear perfect. It goes beyond just wanting to play your best. Wanting to play your best is the goal all athletes should have. That's what you're working toward. But there's a difference between demanding perfection, which really means making no mistakes, and having a healthy drive to be your best, which means you have to accept the inevitability of making mistakes within your game. Now, athletes tend to be perfectionists because they are working so hard to perfect mechanics, perfect their technique, perfect their performance so that they can reach the next level. And perfectionism can have its good qualities. And I want to mention this first because it's not, just pretty much like anything in life or in sports, it's not as cut and dry as it may seem. And I've worked with many athletes who say that their drive to be perfect pushes them. It gives them ambition. It gives them motivation to train because they're working toward this ideal version of themselves. But we also have to be careful as to how this perfectionism is playing out during competition. So during competition, there are two main ways that I see perfectionism hold athletes back. The first is the tension that is created because of this perfectionism. And the second way is the difficulty perfectionism creates when it comes to moving on from mistakes. So let's start with the tension. Tension in sports is caused by us wanting to do well so badly that we're trying to force a good performance. And think about what I said earlier. Perfectionism is not defined as you wanting to do your best. Perfectionism is really defined as you needing to be perfect. Needing to be perfect means no mistakes can happen. A perfect game in baseball means that the pitcher did not hit anybody, didn't walk any batters, there were no errors in the field, and there were no hits. So that pretty much means it was a perfect outing. There were absolutely no mistakes during the game. And that's an incredibly, incredibly rare thing to have happen in baseball. But even when a pitcher throws a perfect game in baseball, that doesn't mean they never throw a ball. And we could even classify as a ball as a mistake in that sense. Yes, they're not walking a batter, but they're not throwing a strike every single pitch. So if that pitcher was expecting themselves to throw a strike every single pitch, that creates an intense amount of tension and stress as they're going into the game. If you are a swimmer and you're thinking, I have to be perfect in this meet, I cannot lose a single heat, I have to make sure that I'm increasing or decreasing my time, every single time I swim. That will increase tension going into the race, going into the meet. If you're a soccer player and you're thinking, I can never make a mistake, I can't turn the ball over once, I can never make a bad pass. Now instead of playing freely, you're playing with tension. So while perfectionism gives us a drive to work hard, a drive to train day in and day out, if we're not careful, that perfectionism will quickly turn into tension and anxiety during competition, and that will lead to underperforming. The next way that this perfectionism holds you back is making it difficult to move on from mistakes. Now, during games, sometimes there will be big mistakes, sometimes there will be small mistakes, but what we can guarantee is that for the most part, there will be mistakes that are made during the game. What's more important than whether or not you make mistakes is how well you move on from mistakes. If you cannot move on quickly from mistakes, if you cannot reset, if you can't play with confidence after mistakes, you'll hold yourself back, you'll underperform. So why does perfectionism make it difficult to move on from mistakes? Well, with perfectionism, what is our goal? It's to be perfect. It's to make no mistakes. What does it indicate when you make one mistake? It means you have failed to reach your goal. When you fail to reach your goal, you can get this overwhelming sense of frustration, and that can make it difficult to move past that mistake because all you've been focusing on going into the game is I cannot make any mistakes. Now you've made a mistake, now frustration ensues. So what can you do to manage your perfectionism? Well, there's a three-part strategy I want to go over that I use with many of the athletes I work with within one-on-one coaching. Which, by the way, if you are interested in my one-on-one coaching program, I've put a link to learn more about that in the description below. So the first thing we want to do, or the first part of this strategy, is to alter your focus going into games. So I said earlier that perfectionism means you are needing to be perfect, or you're needing to appear perfect, which really means you're needing to make no mistakes. When we go into a game and our focus is on making no mistakes, as I said earlier, this creates that tension. It also creates an avoidance mindset, where we are playing to avoid mistakes instead of playing to succeed. While you may be thinking, I would love to do my best today, I would love to succeed, if avoiding mistakes is your top priority due to this perfectionism, that's where tension, that's where timid play and hesitation are formed. So instead, we want to alter our focus. So we want to go from being focused on mistakes, on the outcome, to focusing on the process of your game more. Now, I talk a lot about focusing on the process because I think almost above anything else, when athletes are able to shift their attention from the outcome to the process of their game, many mental game challenges are managed and they start to go away. So what this really means for you is that going into a game, you want to think to yourself, what are the controllable process parts of my game that I really want to focus on? So I mentioned earlier the idea of a pitcher throwing a perfect game, or the pitcher thinking I have to throw a strike every single pitch. Instead of having that be their mentality, right? That be their focus and thinking I cannot throw a ball, I can't walk a batter, I can't make any mistakes. We would want to simplify their focus to be about the process of each pitch. So making sure they go through their pre-pitch routine every time. Making sure that they are throwing each pitch with conviction. Because a lot of times when a pitcher starts off with 2 balls to a batter, so the count is 2-0, they might start becoming timid and taking some off of their pitches because they're trying to place their pitches, which creates a challenge. But instead, if they're just focused on going through the process of every pitch and throwing each pitch with conviction, that puts themselves in the best position to succeed. So as you're going into a game, you want your focus to be on the process. And the way you do this is by thinking to yourself, what are the controllable parts of my game that if I do those put me in the best position to succeed. The second part of this is accepting mistakes. And this plays off of the first idea because it's really difficult for us to go into a game shifting our focus onto the process if we're not able to accept that mistakes might happen. So we have to accept that mistakes are just part of the game. They will happen. And that doesn't mean we can't have a good game. And in all reality, when we try to avoid mistakes and when we cannot accept that mistakes might happen, that leads to a bad game because of everything that I talked about earlier. So the second part of this strategy is more of a mindset shift that you take toward mistakes, where instead of thinking I have to avoid mistakes at all cost, you're thinking I accept that mistakes are part of the game. That does not mean you are wanting to make mistakes, but it does mean you are accepting that they might happen. And what occurs when you accept mistakes is that you give yourself permission to play freely. And you will always find your best performances happen when you are playing freely. When you're able to just go out there, play aggressively, let yourself play like you do during practice. You don't hold yourself back. You don't play timidly. You just play freely. And that can only occur when we are able to accept mistakes. And then the third part of this strategy is to evaluate instead of judging your game. A lot of times perfectionism forms as we criticize ourselves about the mistakes that we made. So after a game, I might think about all the mistakes I made and I will beat myself up. Instead of doing that, I want to productively evaluate my game. And this is where I start to see the mistakes I made as lessons. If I'm going to accept that mistakes are part of the game, I need a new way of looking at mistakes. The new way I will view mistakes is seeing them as lessons and ways to improve. The only way I can do that in an actionable way is to actually think about the mistakes I made after the game, not beat myself up over them, but ask myself the question, how can I learn from these mistakes, or what do I need to work on that will help me minimize these mistakes moving forward? And then that becomes our intention or our goal for the next practice. Or maybe for the next game, we focus on an adjustment that will help us learn and improve because of those mistakes. So when we put all of this together, what we see is that going into a game, we have better focus. We're thinking about the process instead of making no mistakes. And then during the game, we're thinking to ourselves, I'm just going to play freely and I accept that mistakes might happen. And then after the game, instead of judging myself because of the mistakes I made, I will evaluate, I will learn, and then I'll put goals in place for either the next practice or the next game to help myself improve. Now, like I said earlier, if you are interested in my one-on-one coaching program, I have put a link to learn more about that in the description below, along with links to my 2 courses, the Confident Competitor Academy and the Mentally Tough Kid course. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.